presentation. Grace asked me to take over in the question and answer session because she has to leave, unfortunately. So, comments, critical comments and questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very complete presentation. However, I do have to admit and confess that I'm not a believer very much in this type of system. My name is Monica. I come from Colombia. I work with, just to give you like a little background on why I'm not a believer. I work with indigenous people in the Amazon region, and I've been working with them for at least 8 to 10 years. And it is hard for me, to believe in the system when I understand the whole international discussion and all this system and theory that is being discussed at an international level. But when I take a look back and see how indigenous communities or local communities in the Amazon are organized or interacting with government institutions and the mistrust there is between local communities and government institutions, and just the way the environmental institutions are organized. I don't see how these schemes, international schemes, are going to boil down at a local level. And I'm afraid with the situation I see, and or the lack of organization, you can call it, at the local level, with the people taking decisions not in the way we think that they should be taken. How this is going to actually aim at conserving biodiversity, and I'm afraid that it could end up doing quite the contrary. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, obviously, those are very real concerns. I don't know the Colombian context at all. I'm familiar with sort of the discussions in the context of RED with regard to the indigenous peoples to their lobbying and to the type of concerns that they've brought to the table in those negotiations on RED. How are these international schemes going to boil down to the local level is obviously the most important question in terms of assessing if they're desirable or if they're effective in any ways. And I think that when we look at what's happened, for example, in Costa Rica, where you already have a national system for implementing these incentives, that there is a fund at the national level for rewarding landowners who conserve their forests, and we see there that indigenous peoples, I guess it's not the same type of concerns as in Colombia, but they have been marginalized. Their model doesn't fit into that logic, is that they have community-managed forests, and then all of a sudden you have a system where private landowners are rewarded for forest conservation, and so it becomes a source of conflict within these communities that are used to a different way of managing their resources. It's done out of sort of traditional management systems, and to come in and say, well, we need to know who owns this parcel, this parcel, this parcel, so that we can give the different rewards, is not effective. But at the same time, I think the value of these discussions at the international level are very useful in terms of addressing these important questions of the funding gap, of the fact that there is a willingness to pay out there, that there is interest, and that there is a need to have different ways of conserving biodiversity, of trying to attract, in my view, trying to attract other stakeholders, not just international development assistance, but really trying to capitalize on the fact that the environment has become a more prominent issue in society in a large sense. Then we need to be thinking more innovatively, and we need to be trying to use the market forces that are shaping, that do shape the world. So, I mean, I think it's an important, on the demand side, that we need to create a demand, but then you know, on the supply side, being very careful on where that money goes. I'm not sure I really answered that. I myself am very much on the fence with these mechanisms, with these market-based mechanisms. I like to, you know, be optimistic and believe in them because I see them as necessary. But then when it comes time to implementation, I do recognize that it's hard to find success stories.
Since we already talked of bundling in the presentation, maybe we can bundle a few questions and then pass them on to you. I saw already one hand up. Any more hands? I think there's a lot of room to challenge David a little bit. So don't hesitate. Okay. We need a third one for nice package. Okay, let's start with the two.
Okay, my name is Esther. I'm working in water and other natural resources management issues from a now rather social science perspective, but my background is ecologist, so I come from the natural science actually. So yeah, thank you very much for this comprehensive presentation. And yeah, like Monica, I'm a bit critical about this whole issue and trying to get the private market involved in trying to approach or solve the problems that we have with the funding gap. So I see different critical points, and maybe you can comment on these. So on the one hand, I see the carbon market is becoming a very strong instrument, just because climate change is on the agenda very strongly. And so there are some markets that have a stronger issue, or like a stronger publicity than others, for instance. So with RED, for instance, I think we're still talking about a mechanism that is still very unripe and not so much thought through. And there are a lot of trade-offs between the different markets that actually are meant to solve the problems that we have in ecological systems conservation. So for instance, you brought this example from Tanzania, then planting eucalyptus trees to get credits in the carbon market. Then of course there are strong trade-offs with the water market. So these are not tackled because the carbon market at that stage is not talking about bundling. So then you have others, for instance, under RED you can cut down a primary forest and plant oil plantations, which are then still covered under the carbon market and under RED, but still you do not preserve biodiversity in that regard. So this bundling, I think, is a nice idea, but it just shows that how unripe all the other concepts still are. So that's the first where I have really strong concerns. And the other one is with tea. I'm sorry, I'm not yet so familiar with it. I haven't read it. I just have heard very critical comments from other people on that, which say that actually, you mentioned it's giving evidence to the prices. So I would be a bit more careful with the term giving evidence, because others, I mean, I can't cite the sources, unfortunately, but we heard here in other presentations that it's also estimated that the economic value, if at all you can give an economic value to ecosystems, of the world ecosystem would be several times the world market economy. So if you have like this amount of 30, 40 billions, it's just a fraction. So if at all we can give financial values to ecosystems, that just reflects a very, very little fraction of what's there. And I think there's danger in what you said, the two headlines, the green economy and then tea. Tea will be there, and in the whole discussions, when it's being discussed about the green economy, and then these prices will get fixed, these 30 to 40 billion dollars or whatever, that will always be cited there in this context, I'm quite sure. And then I think before settling this thinking of pricing ecosystem services, in this whole discussion on Rio +20, we still need to get back to whether that makes sense at all. So I understand it's about mainstreaming ecological concerns and trying to link them to the market, but there's a very big danger now in setting markets up with very, very unripe concepts. So I would appreciate your explanations that help me better understand that.
Okay, then I pass the word to you. Maybe you can phrase your comment and question a little more concisely.
Yeah, I have a question to please show me slide about the gap. About the ecosystem services and for example, existing services is a concept, but we evaluate the biodiversity or carbon sequestration, something like that. Yeah, that is very important problem, I think. So how to fill these gaps or something like that, and also there are so many ecosystem services, and so that the evaluation of the ecosystem service is different of each ecosystem services. So that if we try to evaluate the economic aspect, we have to harmonize the different type of the ecosystem services. Yeah, that is very important point, I think. So I would like to ask this question.
All right. I guess I'll start with that question on valuation. You say, I think it was raised by the two questions. Obviously, very, very difficult to value the different types of ecosystem services and then aggregate them and say, okay, altogether we have this much value from water, this much value from habitat conservation, this much value, and then overall say this is what your ecosystem is worth. But I think, the short answer to the valuation issue that you brought up is it's just an additional piece of information, and I think that IUCN, for example, we do quite a few valuation studies, and we find them to be particularly useful, basically for our policy work. So when we're trying to help, for example, I was involved in a project in Burkina Faso. We're trying to help the government recognize how their water resources are maybe more valuable than simply for irrigation. We actually need to come at them with figures. That's sort of how they respond to it. But that we realize that we're reducing the ecosystem values to a simple figure, saying, okay, if you aggregate all the different benefits coming from the water that you have in this area, it contributes this much to agriculture, but it's also regulating different flows, and the whole. We actually did it for a whole wetland area, saying that if you drain the water, then you're losing these types of benefits. That's the type of information that they needed. They needed to be concise. They needed to get a general sense, and it's our responsibility to communicate the limits of that and say, listen, this is an estimation. Obviously, not everybody is going to agree on that value, but it's what we use to try and influence policy. It's just an additional piece of information, and obviously expecting the different decision makers to recognizing that it's an imperfect piece of information. It's just that having some information is better than none. I think that's the usual justification that environmental economists would use to justify their work, saying, well, if we don't do that, then we don't know how we don't know anything about the value